The sound of my mother's laugh sliced through the air like broken glass, sharp and humiliating. "No wonder you're still single at 35, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction, as though she'd just won a lifetime argument. The laughter that followed from the table made my throat burn. I could feel every eye at that polished oak dining table turned toward me, the successful daughter who had somehow become the family's favorite punchline. My fork froze mid-air, the roasted chicken on my plate suddenly tasting like sand. "Mom," I whispered, hoping the tremor in my voice didn't betray me. "That's enough." She smirked, unfazed, swirling her wine as if this was just another normal Sunday dinner, as if the words she'd just thrown at me weren't tearing through everything I'd built to survive her. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. The chandelier above shimmered with the same cold perfection as the woman who'd raised me. Vivian Harrington, queen of control, master of appearances, and the reason I'd built my life out of lies. The dinner was supposed to be simple, a family reunion after months apart. My polite appearance at her monthly charity brunch turned family dinner. But it had turned into her stage, as always. My brother, Evan, chuckled weakly, trying to break the tension. "Come on, Mom, don't tease her." She rolled her eyes, her tone patronizing. "I'm not teasing, darling. I'm simply pointing out that Jemima has always been selective. Picky, perhaps, or maybe afraid." Her words twisted in the air like poison ivy, curling tighter with each syllable. I wanted to scream that I wasn't single, that the reason I didn't bring anyone to these gatherings was because the man I loved, the man I married, wasn't someone she'd ever accept. Adrian, with his gentle voice and carpenter's hands, didn't fit her world of tailored suits and marble countertops. She'd destroyed every relationship I'd ever had before him, and I wasn't about to let her destroy this one. My hands trembled under the table. I thought of Adrian's smile that morning, his hand brushing against mine as he handed me coffee. "You'll get through today," he said. "Just breathe." But how do you breathe when you've spent your life being suffocated by perfection? My mother leaned back, satisfied with the silence she'd created. The clink of silverware resumed, the room filled with the awkward chatter of people pretending not to notice a wound bleeding in front of them. My 5-year-old son, Oliver, sat quietly next to me, drawing on a napkin with a pen he'd found in my purse. His small fingers moved with focus, his tongue poking out as he sketched a crooked heart. I'd brought him only because my babysitter had fallen sick last minute, and because I thought, foolishly, that maybe, just maybe, his presence would soften her. I should have known better. Vivian didn't soften. She cracked, and she cracked others. She glanced at Oliver with mild disinterest. "Whose child is that?" she asked suddenly, voice cutting through the chatter. My chest clenched. My brother looked confused. "Mom, that's—" But before anyone could speak, Oliver looked up, bright-eyed and innocent, and said the words that froze the room. "I'm Jemima's son," he said proudly, "and you're my grandma." The silence that followed was absolute. My heart stopped. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears as her wineglass halted midair. Vivian blinked once, twice, as if the word grandma was an insult she couldn't process. "What did you say?" she whispered. Oliver tilted his head, puzzled by the tension. "Grandma, Mommy says you like fancy things, so I drew you a castle." He pushed the napkin toward her, the heart now turned into a lopsided tower. My brother's fork clattered against his plate. My mother's lips tightened into a thin line. "You have a child," she said finally, each word measured and cold. My throat constricted. Every lie, every excuse, every carefully built wall was crumbling before my eyes. I could feel the weight of years of deception pressing down on my chest. "Yes," I whispered, because lying now was useless. "I have a son." Her eyes blazed, not with surprise, but with betrayal. "You hid a child from me?" she hissed, the edge of her voice low enough that only those closest could hear. I nodded slowly, unable to find words. My brother looked from me to her, confusion etched into every line of his face. "Jem, what's going on?" I swallowed hard. I didn't want him to grow up in the same kind of world I did. I didn't want him to be judged by money, by appearances, by you. Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor, the sound slicing through the tension. Unbelievable. You think you can just disappear, build your own little life without telling your family? Her voice rose with every word. Who's the father? Another man who wasn't good enough for the Harrington name? My breath hitched. His name is Adrian, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. We're married. The word hung in the air like a confession. The room went silent again. My mother's laugh this time was cold, humorless. Married, she repeated. So that's where you've been hiding all these years, pretending to be someone else. Do you even realize what you've done to this family's reputation? I wanted to say that I didn't care, that reputation meant nothing when weighed against love and freedom, but my voice trembled with a lifetime of fear. I was protecting myself, I said quietly, from you. The words escaped before I could swallow them back. Her face froze, then hardened. Protecting yourself, she repeated slowly, as if the phrase was a foreign language. From your own mother? I looked at her, really looked at her. The perfect hair, the diamond necklace that glinted like armor, the eyes that saw everyone's flaws but her own. You've controlled every part of my life since I was a child, I said, my voice breaking. You told me who to love, what to wear, how to think. You ruined every man I ever cared for. You told me I'd be nothing without you. So I built a life without you, and I made sure you couldn't find it. The words poured out like a dam breaking. My mother's nostrils flared, her voice trembling with rage. You ungrateful little— Mom, Evan interrupted sharply, his voice firm. Stop. But she didn't. You think you can defy me and not pay the price? That trust fund your father left you, it can be reviewed, adjusted. Don't think I won't. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but I met her gaze. Do what you need to do, but you don't own me anymore. For a second, something flickered in her expression, shock, maybe even fear, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She turned to Oliver, who was now hiding behind my chair, confused by the anger around him. So this is the child you thought you could hide from me. He's adorable, but you've made a terrible mistake keeping him from his family. Her voice softened, dangerously so. I will fix this. I knew what that meant. No, I said sharply, you won't. You won't call, you won't interfere, and you will never threaten us again. My mother's smile returned, slow and venomous. We'll see about that. She turned to Evan. We're leaving. My brother hesitated, torn between us. Mom, now. Her tone was final. Evan gave me an apologetic glance before following her. The front door closed with a heavy thud, leaving behind a silence so deep it roared in my ears. I exhaled shakily, my entire body trembling. Oliver peeked up at me, his small voice soft. Did I do something bad? My heart broke. I pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. No, sweetheart, you just told the truth. Later that night, when the house was quiet and Oliver was asleep, I sat by the window staring into the darkness. My phone buzzed. It was Adrian. How bad was it? He asked. I could hear the worry. She knows, I whispered. She knows everything. There was a long pause, then his voice came steady and calm. Then it's time, he said. Time to stop running. I stared at the reflection of myself in the glass, tired eyes, shaking hands, but something else too. Resolve. He was right. For 5 years, I lived in hiding, terrified of the woman who'd made me. But tonight, when Oliver called her Grandma, something changed. The truth was out, and the world hadn't ended. Not yet. I felt the storm brewing on the horizon, the confrontation, the reckoning. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to face it, because this time I wasn't alone. I had a family worth fighting for. Still, as I looked out at the empty street, headlights flickered in the distance. A sleek black Mercedes slowed near the curb, its engine idling for a long moment before it finally drove away. My heart pounded. I didn't need to see the license plate to know who it was. My mother wasn't done with me. Not yet. The next morning began with a knock that didn't sound like a neighbor's or a delivery. It was too sharp, too deliberate, the kind of knock that announced authority. I froze mid-step, coffee mug in hand, my heart sinking into my stomach. Adrian looked up from fixing Oliver's toy car on the living room floor, his eyes instantly meeting mine. "You expecting someone?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. My fingers tightened around the mug. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming outside. I moved to the window, parting the curtains just enough to see the black Mercedes parked at the curb, gleaming like a shadow in the morning sun. "She's here," I whispered. Adrian stood, his jaw tightening, and set the screwdriver down. "Let me handle this," he said. But before he could move, the front door opened, not because someone had been let in, but because my mother had never believed in waiting for permission. She stepped inside as if she owned the place, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, her perfume filling the air like smoke. "You changed your locks," she said coolly, glancing around. "I suppose that was supposed to keep me out." "Mom, you can't just—" "Oh, don't be dramatic, Jemima," she interrupted. "We need to talk." Adrian moved forward, calm but firm. "Mrs. Harrington, this isn't your home. You can't just walk in uninvited." She gave him a glance so cutting it could have shattered glass. "And you must be the husband," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "The mysterious man my daughter thought was worth destroying her family for." Adrian didn't flinch. "Worth building a family with," he corrected softly. That one word, building, seemed to rattle her. She scanned the room, her eyes sweeping over the pictures on the mantel, the crayon drawings, the handmade coffee table Adrian had crafted. "Charming," she murmured. "Very humble." I stepped closer, my voice trembling. "Why are you here?" She turned to me, her face unreadable. "To see the life you thought you could hide from me," she said. "To understand how far my daughter has fallen." Her words hit me like a slap. Adrian took a step forward, his voice steady but sharp. "You don't have to like how we live, but you will respect it." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Respect?" she repeated, almost amused. "Do you even understand what that word means in this family? Respect is earned, not demanded." I clenched my fists. "Then stop pretending you've earned mine." The silence that followed was heavy enough to choke on. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, a shadow of uncertainty, but she quickly masked it with a smirk. "You've grown bold. Marriage seems to have given you a voice. I wonder how long that will last when the money runs out." "What money?" I snapped. "I don't live off your fortune. I work, Mom. I've built everything here with Adrian. We don't need your name or your inheritance." Her lips curled. "You think you're independent because you make a salary. The house you're standing in, who do you think helped you get the loan? Who made sure your credit was acceptable? You've been living in a fantasy, Jemima. Everything you have is still because of me." My stomach twisted. "That's not true." She smiled, tilting her head. "Then check the records. I've always looked out for you, even when you didn't deserve it." Adrian's hand found mine, steady and grounding. "We're done here. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." My mother's expression shifted, shock, then rage. "You would call the police on me?" she hissed. "Your own mother?" I stepped in front of him, my voice firm. "If I have to, yes." The air between us felt electric, charged with years of resentment and unspoken words. Oliver appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy," he said softly, "what's happening?" My mother's gaze softened for the briefest second when she saw him. "Hello, Oliver," she said, forcing a smile. "Do you remember me?" He nodded shyly. "You came yesterday. Your grandma." The word landed like a spark in a dry field. Vivian blinked, her composure faltering. "Yes," she said after a pause. "That's right." She crouched down, trying to meet his eyes, but Oliver clutched my leg tightly. "You made Mommy sad," his small voice trembling. The look that crossed her face was unlike anything I'd seen before. Hurt, confusion, maybe even guilt. But she quickly stood up, regaining her poise.
"I didn't mean to," she said softly, and for a fleeting moment, I believed her. Adrian stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrington, you're welcome here, but only if you come as family, not as an invader." Her eyes darted to his, studying him like a puzzle she didn't understand. "Family," she repeated. How quaint. I could see the cracks forming, the subtle war between her pride and the reality of what stood before her. A daughter she couldn't control, a home she didn't build, and a grandchild who saw right through her armor. Finally, she turned to me. "You've made your choice," she said. "Don't come running when it all falls apart." "It won't," I said quietly, "because I finally built something real." She opened her mouth to retort, but Adrian's voice cut in. "Would you like to stay for dinner tonight?" She blinked, taken aback. "Dinner?" "Yes," he said simply. "If you're going to be in our lives, let's start properly." I looked at him in disbelief. "Adrian!" But he squeezed my hand gently, his eyes telling me to trust him. My mother hesitated, her pride warring with curiosity. "Fine," she said finally. "Dinner." She turned to leave. 6 o'clock. Don't embarrass yourselves. When the door closed behind me, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "Why did you invite her?" I whispered. "Because," Adrian said, "you can't beat someone like her by hiding. You beat her by showing her what she can't destroy." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. I cleaned the house twice, rearranged furniture, then rearranged it again. Oliver followed me around, asking endless questions. "Will Grandma be nice?" I smiled weakly. "We'll see." When the clock struck 6, the doorbell rang. Vivian stood there holding a bottle of wine, her peace offering, though the label alone probably cost more than our month's groceries. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space again, this time with less judgment and more curiosity. Dinner was awkward at first, the conversation polite but strained. Adrian talked about his woodworking business, Oliver showed him his drawings, and I sat in quiet disbelief watching my mother sit at our small table eating pasta I'd made with my own hands. Then, halfway through the meal, Oliver said something that shifted everything. "Grandma," he said between bites, "Daddy built this table. Isn't it cool?" She looked at the table, running her hand along its smooth surface. "You built this?" she asked Adrian. "Yes," he said. "Every piece in this house, actually." She paused, her voice softening. "It's beautiful." For a heartbeat, silence hung between us, not tense, but fragile. I caught Adrian's glance. Something was changing. After dinner, Vivian lingered in the living room, her eyes landing on a photograph of my father. "You kept this," she said quietly. I nodded. "He would have loved Oliver." Her expression flickered. "Your father was proud of you," she murmured, more to herself than to me. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "He told me once," she continued, "that you'd do something meaningful." I didn't believe him. Maybe I should have. For the first time, I didn't see the cold matriarch. I saw a woman who'd been afraid her whole life, afraid of losing control, afraid of being irrelevant. "Mom," I said softly, "you don't have to fight me anymore." She looked at me, her voice trembling. "And if I don't? Then we can start over." The silence stretched. Then, with a shaky breath, she nodded once. "We'll see," she said. When she left that night, she didn't slam the door. She simply said, "Good night, Jemima." It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. After she was gone, Adrian pulled me into his arms. "You did it," he whispered. "You stood your ground." But as I rested my head against his chest, something still gnawed at me. A question, an unease I couldn't shake. The next morning, while tidying the kitchen, I found a folded note near the wine bottle she'd brought. It was addressed to me, written in her neat handwriting. "You don't know the full story," it read. "Come to the old estate tomorrow at noon, alone. There are things you need to understand before it's too late." My stomach turned. I didn't know if it was another manipulation or something deeper, but my instincts told me I had to go. When Adrian saw the note, his face tightened. "She's pulling you back in," he warned. "Don't let her." "What if she's telling the truth?" I asked. He hesitated, then sighed. "Then go, but promise me you'll be careful." I promised. The next day, I drove to the Harrington estate, the house I hadn't stepped foot in for 6 years. It looked exactly as I remembered. Towering gates, manicured lawns, and windows that gleamed like they were guarding secrets. My mother was waiting on the porch, her posture straight, her face unreadable. "You came," she said simply. "You said it was important." She nodded and gestured toward the door. "There's something you need to see." Inside, everything was the same. Polished floors, sterile perfection, the faint scent of roses that always reminded me of control. She led me to my father's old study, a place she'd once forbidden me from entering. The desk was covered in folders and papers, and at the center, a single envelope with my name on it. "What is this?" I asked. "Your father's final letter," she said quietly. "I found it after he died. I wasn't ready to show you until now." My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was short, written in my father's familiar looping handwriting. "My dearest Jemima, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect you the way I wanted to. Your mother means well, but fear makes her cruel. The trust fund I left is irrevocable. She cannot touch it. Live freely, my darling. You were never meant to be controlled. Love, Dad." My breath caught. I looked up at her, realization dawning. "You lied," I whispered. She didn't deny it. "I was trying to keep you safe," though her voice cracked on the last word. "Safe from what? From love? From myself?" "From losing you," she said, tears glinting in her eyes. "You don't understand what it's like to watch your child walk away." "Then why didn't you just let me live?" I demanded. "Why destroy everything that made me happy?" Her face crumpled, the first true crack in her armor I'd ever seen. "Because I didn't know how else to love you." The words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, the world felt still. And then, before I could respond, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the house, followed by a sharp cry from the doorway. My heart stopped when I saw who stood there. Oliver, my son, his small frame shaking, eyes wide with fear. "Mommy," he whispered, voice trembling, "Grandma said you'd come alone." My blood ran cold. "Oliver, what are you doing here?" But before I could move toward him, another voice echoed from behind, the one I least expected. "I told him to come," said my brother, stepping into the light, "because you deserve to know the truth." When I opened the door that morning, the wind carried the faint scent of lilac from the garden Adrian planted last spring. It was peaceful, the kind of peace I'd once prayed for but never believed I'd earn. Then I saw her car, the black Mercedes again, gleaming under the Colorado sun, too polished for the gravel road it sat on. My heartbeat quickened, but it wasn't fear this time. It was something quieter. Acceptance, maybe. I stood in the doorway for a long second before she stepped out. Vivian Harrington, impeccable as always, wrapped in her cream coat and pearl earrings, holding a small bouquet of white roses that seemed too delicate for her hands. She looked at me like someone staring at a stranger they almost recognized. "I didn't call first," she said softly, her voice stripped of her usual command. "I know." I stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, Oliver was on the rug with his building blocks, humming to himself when he saw her. His eyes widened with the innocence of someone who didn't understand history, only the present. "Hi, Grandma," he said cheerfully, as if he'd been saying it his whole life. The word landed between us like a fragile truth, real, heavy, but warm. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she smiled faintly and lowered herself to her knees. "Hello, Oliver." She said his name as though tasting it for the first time. Adrian came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His tone was polite, neutral. "Mrs. Harrington?" "Adrian," she replied. No venom, just acknowledgement. For the first time, they stood as equals in the same room. We all did. The roses trembled in her hand before she placed them gently on the table. "They were your father's favorite," she murmured. That was her apology. small but real. We talked over coffee, though talked feels like too simple a word for what it was. It was more like walking barefoot through a field of glass and realizing halfway through that the pain meant healing. She asked about Oliver's school, about Adrian's carpentry business, about the small writing projects I'd taken up. Her tone carried curiosity, not control. Once she glanced at the photo wall, the one that had once been empty because I'd been afraid to fill it. Now it was alive with our life, birthdays, camping trips, and messy kitchen mornings. "You look happy," she said quietly. "I am." Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't argue. That silence was everything. Adrian offered her pie, the one he made every Sunday. She accepted, though she barely ate. I could tell she was trying. Oliver chattered about stars and planets, about the telescope Grandma helped me fix. It was such a simple moment that I almost missed how monumental it was. This woman who once measured love by obedience, sitting at our humble table listening to her grandson's joy. When the afternoon light shifted, she stood to leave, but before she did, she turned to me. "Jemima, I don't know how to do this, being different. Then just start. Right here is fine." She nodded, blinking fast. There were tears she wouldn't let fall, and for the first time, I didn't need her to. When her car disappeared down the road, Adrian came up behind me, his hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. That night, after we put Oliver to bed, I sat by the window, the moonlight catching the edge of my wedding ring. I thought about all the lies I'd once told to survive, the pretend apartment, the fake smiles, the phone calls where I said, "I'm fine, Mom," when I was anything but. Those years felt like a maze, every turn aligned with fear of her disapproval. And now, for the first time, I saw the exit. It wasn't about escaping her. It was about choosing myself. Weeks passed and Vivian kept her distance, but not her silence. Small gestures began arriving. Cards, a box of Oliver's old family photos she'd hidden, and a check with a note that simply said, "For his college fund." I didn't cash it, but I kept it, not as money, but as proof that something inside her had cracked open, just enough for light to get through.
The town's gossip faded too. People stopped whispering about that Harrington girl who disappeared. They started saying, "Jemima runs the best storytelling workshop at the library." It wasn't fame, but it was mine. One evening, Rebecca visited from Chicago. She sat at our kitchen island with a glass of wine, grinning. "So this is the secret life you were hiding from me," she teased. "I can't believe you kept it all locked away." I smiled. "I had to, but I'm done hiding." She raised her glass. "To freedom." I clinked mine against hers. "To truth." A few days later, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, the handwriting elegant. I knew it before opening. Inside was a note from Vivian. Just 2 lines. "You were right. Control isn't love. I'm learning that now. Tell Oliver Grandma's proud of him." I cried, not because I needed her words, but because they no longer defined me. They simply existed, like a door finally unlocked. The next weekend, we drove up to the mountains, Adrian's idea. Oliver fell asleep in the back seat, clutching his bear, Mr. Beans. As the car climbed the winding road, I looked out at the expanse of sky spilling over the peaks. It felt endless, clean, alive. Adrian reached over, took my hand, and squeezed. "You ever think about what you'd tell your younger self?" he asked. "Every day," I whispered. "I tell her she's not broken, just brave." When we reached the summit, the sun was setting in slow gold layers. We spread out a blanket, and Oliver woke just in time to see the stars pierce through the dusk. "Look, Mommy," he said, pointing upward, "the first one." I smiled. "Make a wish." He closed his eyes tight, then whispered, "I wish Grandma comes back for Christmas." My chest tightened, but not with pain this time. "Maybe she will," I said, brushing his hair. "Maybe she already is, in her own way." Later that night, back home, I tucked him into bed and stood at the doorway a moment longer, watching his slow, steady breathing. For years, I'd been haunted by the echo of my mother's words, the ones that started it all. "No wonder you're still single at 35.
I used to hear them like a curse. Now they were just noise, faint and far away, drowned by the sound of my son's laughter and Adrian's gentle footsteps in the hall. The house creaked, alive and warm, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of its quiet. I walked to the living room, lit one small candle, and looked at the photo of my father. "She's trying, Dad," I whispered. "We both are." Outside, the wind carried the scent of lilac again. I realized life had come full circle, not perfectly, not painlessly, but beautifully. My story didn't end with rebellion or victory. It ended with peace, hard-won, fragile, but real. And as I turned off the light and headed to bed, I knew one thing for certain. The walls I'd built to protect myself had finally turned into windows, and through them I could see everything I'd ever fought for: love, truth, and the freedom to be exactly who I am.